Right, it's you.
Oh, okay.
It's your bad point.
Yeah, okay. Well, my bad point is that I'm pretty concerned about Hampus as a player or what his future is. It's kind of hard to tell
Outside,
right
obviously, of whatever the fuck's going on. You mean like in another context in the game, right?
But I guess everything. Oh,
Oh, it's just the whole package, right?
Basically, we don't know.
No,
Basically,
no
we
one
don't
knows.
know
There's
what's
no info
going
at
on.
all.
Yeah, we don't know what's going on in terms of him having to take a leave, but I'm also concerned. Yeah, so I'll bring it back to, obviously, I don't know what the situation is there.
Oh, I will say, though, if you actually read the statement, though, Maui, it is almost implied it's like something like burnout, because they purposely put like that. It saw medical professionals and the sports psychologist or whatever that guy. So it's almost implied it's like some sort of mental aspect, right?
Right, exactly. So that actually kind of colors how I see his future playing out, which is kind of like, think of Alex from Vitality,
right,
where there was a lot of potential there. It felt like this guy could have probably made a lot of teams very good, and now we see that Alex from Vitality is not really doing anything. It doesn't even seem like he's in the discussions. Like, okay, in this French shuffle, like Alex could have easily taken a place on any of these rosters and been such an asset to them. Like, imagine him instead of, I don't know, one of the people on Shox's roster, for example. Whatever, either way. And I just don't want Hampus to go down that route necessarily, because what was so cool about Hampus is that he was thrust into a role that he probably never should have really been, which was the in-game leader. He somehow, despite the fact that the T sides weren't that good, he found his own as an individual, and so that he showed he could be an asset as a player on the team. And yet he's now kind of taken himself out of the fray, and so it seems like with where NIP's moving, it doesn't seem like he's going to come back for the major. Like, this is going to be config. I don't see any reason why Hampus would be able to slot back in, and so I just don't know where he's going to go. And I think that we might be losing out on a player that never was top 20 in the world, but was one that was probably in the, I'd say, top 35.
Yeah,
it was top 30 maybe even. So I think that he was really someone that was also very exciting to watch. Like his style was it was kind of like gimmicky. Sometimes it was like a slightly more refined art. Like, he wasn't just throwing his life away, but he had a lot of tricks. And I think that those kind of openers for the game there's a reason people love Yakindar, because he just throws himself into fights all the time. Hampus would do the same, but he would be a little bit more schemy, and I think that's always very exciting too. And so for him to fallen off in the way he has, like, he didn't play that well at the spring groups, and it seems like it's due in part to the fact that he's having whatever issues he's having now, but I just kind of almost don't see him coming back. And so I just think that's bad.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think,
yeah, honestly, it felt a bit doomed. The moment he came off calling, but then they brought in Alexi B, because there's no way, from what we hear about Alexi B behind the scenes, the way his system's supposed to work, the things he wants for his players, there's no real way Hampus is allowed to be like second calling his own number, taking massive risks the way he would before. So from that side of things, you're almost new to him as a player. He's no longer the same Hampus. And I think that just added on. It just compounded with the fact that almost every IGL says they never want to be an IGL. But I heard from a lot of Swedish people telling me that, like, yeah, he was a second call for a while, then took over because he had to, and then now people were like, we'll bring him in because he's doing a decent job of it. And yeah, he had some impressive moments, but I think it just keeps adding on issues, like the extra stress of having to do this role, all that extra work that comes with it, not really being just himself. And ideally, you do want him to be himself, like to make those openings happen. I think, yeah, it all just kept on adding up. And then when you bring in Lexi B, it kind of solves the problem, but it has to. The solution realistically is minus Hampus at the end of the day. And I think it's the right move to bring in config. Like us, I mean, almost any team adding config at this point is a good move. But yeah, for Hampus, it's pretty much the final straw. It's been going downhill for a little while, and yeah, here he is. He's got whatever personal issues. Hopefully, it's nothing serious that gets resolved, and he comes back to Counter-Strike. But the Swedish scene being the way it is, it's tough to see the road back in.
Yeah, I will say, obviously, this has to have a massive asterisk on it, because who the fuck knows what's going on with him and how it's affected? We can't know. We're not inside his head. And so just like the device one, you can't know if they ever come back. Do they come back the same? Are they fundamentally different people? Do they think of the game differently? Also, there's a one which people haven't even thought of with the device one is like, will this reoccur? Like, will this happen in 6 months, in 3 months? Like, that's the problem. Once you get on this train, you head to a destination, no one knows what it is because we haven't done this before. In old CS, you just have to retire if you can't play anymore. You just know, I'm taking 3 months off. Like, well, maybe if you were like Kenny S, you could have done that. Like, you're not if you're Hampus though. Like, if you're just some player in the pack, like, either play or get the fuck out. That was sort of the mentality back in the day. And spoiler, when it wasn't the optics PR era, they'd just tell you get the fuck out. They wouldn't be like, we respect you as a member of our family. No, there's none of that garbage where they sell you that PR angle. So what I would say is this. I will say, I'll be very careful, King T, because you have a point on the ugly one that I'll try not to veer too much into. But the one angle I have is this. I agree with you, Murray. When he was at his best, I actually thought Hampus showed that he was a player individually who had a lot of fucking promise. Because here's the difference. I agree with you. That was even the analogy I would use is I think he's a better version of Art. He's probably not as skilled as Art, but the difference is I did get the sense with Art. This is why I always thought Art and Suey2K were always overrated players. I don't think it was like genius or like intuition that made them make those plays. I think it was audacity. What I like about those players is they believe they're going to get the win. That's why if you notice when Stewie's confidence gone, he had nothing in his game. He was just a bad player. When he didn't believe in himself, he was gone. But you know, even at his best, he would run through a brick wall. He would be a worse version of your Kindam. He would either get through 10 times or he'd just die 10 times. Like, but you did need in certain teams someone who had the balls to do it. The thing is, to me, Hampus was like, I agree. I thought his feel for when to do like timing pushes was way better. Like, it actually was why I wonder even if being the IGL helped that element. You know, like a bit like that famous thing where a bunch of clutch players. There's a famous concept that like if you actually did use to wall hack, it does make you better at knowing like intuitively where people should be on the map. Like just logically, and there's a lot of players. I don't have to tell you all the names, but some very famous players where I'm not surprised they're fucking godlike at that. They used to be little rats back in the day. So the big issue for me is this, is I sort of agree. If you know how narratives work, the real concern for Hampus is this. I agree with King T. I think the config edition could actually be potentially very good. I think the variants just went way up on this team. And I think there's a world where they can make deep runs. Like they could do, kind of they could be a team in the quarterfinals if everything goes great. Who the fuck knows? Sure, there's other factors like the head trick thing has to get figured out. But I think that's a point. So the one concern I have if you're Hampus is this. You might not get another crack at this because crucially, they didn't say config's just standing in while you're out. They just said welcome config, new player. So they have 6 players now. Now here's the concern. If you come back and the team does have some results, they're probably not going to kick config. And they're probably, sadly, a lot of people do this, going to think one for one, they're going to go, well, he's better than you. My problem is this. If I was going to switch the team in a few months, I would probably say, if you're coming back, Hampus, you're taking Broland's position because config's a better fucking Broland, mate. Like, where do we need this guy? Because I'm not going to go into it too much, King, because it's your point coming up in a minute. But basically, I do think that's the player on NIP that, like, has never lived up to the name, unfortunately. Like, I had huge hopes for this guy. I thought you could make him the star, but it hasn't really worked out. And I know no one ever does it because they still in Swedish CS, by the way, you notice there's a vibe like NACS. You just kick the player you think's the least skilled every time. You don't kick based on position or role because I think Swedes, unfortunately, because they're so used to that default style, they also believe, you just make it work if you have top players. We can all do all the roles and all that fucking jazz. So I'm concerned, basically, you might not get a chance in NIP again. Whereas I think, actually, as long as NIP isn't like the fucking 3rd best team in the world, so I'd give him a chance when he comes back if it's in 3 months or 6 months or right after the major or something. I'd at least give it a crack because I still feel like there's wiggle room in this roster. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.